What racing fan doesn't love collecting NASCAR diecast? Well, next season, NASCAR's got an all-new car coming to the Cup Series, the next-gen car. Diecasts are going to look a little different. Today, the CEO of Lionel Racing is going to give you an inside look at next year's next-gen diecast. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. We have a very special episode in store for y'all today. Earlier this week, I got to speak to the CEO of Lionel Racing, and he showed us the next-gen car in die-cast form, the Ford, Chevy, Toyota 164, 124 scale. Really cool stuff. We also talked about the behind-the-scenes process, what it takes to get your favorite driver's die-cast produced from start to finish. Really awesome stuff. This is a longer episode, but I hope you all enjoy hearing my conversation with the CEO of Lionel, Howard Hitchcock. Enjoy. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to a very special episode of Out of the Groove. My name is Eric, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by the CEO of Lionel. That's right, the official diecast of NASCAR, Howard Hitchcock. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good morning, and excited to have a conversation about some of the stuff on the docket here.
Yeah, see, I'm an avid diecast collector, as most racing fans that I've talked to are. Who doesn't love collecting NASCAR diecasts from throughout the years? Favorite drivers, like people who collect their favorite driver's paint scheme. I saw a photo, I think on Twitter or Instagram, of a Chase Elliott fan who had every 124 scale Chase Elliott car that he's like ever run, and that blew my mind. So there are a lot of passionate NASCAR diecast collectors out there, but I understand you have some pretty exciting new stuff to show us here today that fans will get kind of a first look at, which I'm really excited about. But first, one other reason today is an important day is that we are officially launching the official Lionel Racing podcast, a part of the Out of the Groove Podcast Network. Authenticated, the Diecast Collectors podcast is now streaming and available for download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any other major podcast platform. So how important is it for you guys to be able to speak directly to diecast fans and collectors out there?
It's a great question. It's hugely important for us to be able to communicate with the fans. I mean, we constantly are monitoring social channels and trying to gain feedback from fans and what they like, what they don't like, trying to address questions and answers, some of which we'll be able to discuss here. But having a platform to really be able to share information, we're very open about how things sort of happen, evolve, what we're doing. And we really like the notion of having that platform to share. Several years ago, really prior to Lionel's involvement in the sport, I was part of a group, and we did a radio show on Sirius XM called NASCAR Collector. And that was a great Saturday morning show. It ran for about 3 years or so. We did a couple live venues. I think we were an hour to start, went to 2 hours, and it was a great way of talking to people who had a passion, right? Had a passion to discuss diecast and talk about. There was a lot of talk about valuation to it, but really it was a great way of walking through how things happen, how things come together. And that was sort of my role on the show. And I would talk about the production process and what was coming up and what was new and exciting. And we'd have drivers, but always has been a great platform to share information. And so this is the new iteration of that. And we're real excited to see it get out there.
The next step in its evolution. Yeah, we're very excited to be able to share that with all the fans. Again, that is now available for listening, authenticated, the Diecast Collectors podcast, available really anywhere you get your podcasts. Well, we've got a lot of exciting things to talk about today, but I do want to start with this first. NASCAR fans are excited to see the next-gen car on the track next season, but that also means that the next years of diecasts are going to look a little bit different. So what can you tell us about the next-gen diecast, how it's in production, and maybe what fans can expect?
Honestly, when new cars are sort of brought to life, it's probably part of the coolest part of the job that we get to do here, because we get brought in very, very early on. And part of what makes Lionel so successful, or Lionel Racing so successful, is our relationship with not only the sport, but the teams, and how we handle confidential information and bring things to life, such as new cars. So we actually have had the chassis data and have been working on the chassis data since February of 2020.
Wow.
And there's been a lot of things that have evolved over the course of that period of time, things that have changed. But in order for us to sort of hit our timelines, that's really where things needed to start. And so my production team and the factory that we work with have really been handling that data and preparing for this new car. We know it's huge. Obviously, the pandemic it has made things interesting, and we've had to figure out different ways to work than we might have in the past. But really, it's a process that you go through. It's a very long process, working closely with the sport, with NASCAR Tech, to really deliver the most authentic version of what will eventually be the final car on track, to the final diecast. And so there's a lot of things that come in pieces to us, especially with the development of this car. It's truly, and I've been involved on this side of it since 2006. So the first car I brought to life was the old style car before the car of tomorrow for the Toyota Camry when they first joined the sport. Toyota first joined the sport. And that was actually my first total new tool that I had worked on back when I was director of DieCast production. And then, of course, we launched the car tomorrow. And NASCAR collectors, diecast collectors, will remember that had some challenges. We had that front splitter that was a real pain, and the rear wing, and we had to figure out different ways to secure the car and protect the car in shipping. And so every iteration, you have these things that happen that you don't foresee in part of the production process. There are stages we go through to make sure things work. We do drop testing, but real life is often a little bit different than what we can simulate. And there's the physical component of it, right, which we'll show and kind of talk about. But then there's also the technical side of it that has to happen. So once you actually have a physical model, we need a wireframe that's created by the factory. Now that process has changed since 2006 to today, how we actually get that. Then we have to build an art template so that we can actually take and interpret the graphics onto a template that we can then use as a production piece that we send to the factory so that they can have the decals created. And then the second part is that we can render onto a screen so that when we put out sales sheets or online images, that's what you actually are seeing. That is our art template wrapped over a 3D model that allows us to have a virtual creation of the race car. And so all of those steps have to go into play. Obviously, the OEMs have a big part in this because they supply us with the graphic packages for the front and rear taillights and manufacturer OEM markings. There's always little things to work through and work out. But this year with this car, it is a literal ground up rebuild. We've always been able to use parts and pieces, the interiors, wheels and tires, chassis typically transfer over from generation to generation, even when Gen 6 came out. This year, because of the way things are changing with the sport, and how we're going to have one center lug versus the multiple lugs, and the wheel style being more of a real road car, street car type version, we've literally had to rebuild every single piece. And so massive investment on our side. The more parts and pieces you have to build, the more parts and pieces have to come together. So there's more complications with that. But we are really proud of what we've got sitting here in front of us. I've got all the samples sitting here on my desk, one from each OEM in 24 and 64 scale. And, I think they look awesome. There's a couple of minor tweaks that we are making to these as we speak, as we go into what we call our second shot. But we have basically released the tools to the factory to get them ready for production at this point.
Wow. Well, so they're sitting right in front of you there. Is there any chance we can get a slight peek at maybe what the next gen's going to look like? Get an idea?
Yeah, sure.
Show that they're real. They're actually happening.
They're actually physically in my hand. Yes.
Wow.
So I'm going to try to hold them up to the camera here. They are white, so they're not. They don't necessarily transfer super.
Oh, look at
so
the
what
wheels.
I'm holding here is this is the Chevy 124 scale ARC. So with the ARC, we've got the opening hood. Does have a plastic chassis. Now that motor looks quite a bit different than the previous motors.
Yeah.
You can see those sort of two squares over here on the side. Those are actually the air intakes that feed to the louvers. Now you'll notice our hood is not louvered. So that surface is not there. And the reason is, for production purposes, we did not believe that we would build a product that people would be happy with that. So we talked to all the teams and decided that it was better for us to do that through a representation in decal. You will notice that the chassis is quite different on this car.
Mm-hmm.
It's what NASCAR is referring to as an underwing. And so the fins out the back help direct the air, and we've got sort of the what you will see is all of the, obviously, the manufacturer details will be put in through the decals.
Wow.
We do have the operating roof flaps on an ARC.
Sweet.
But even, I don't know if you can see, one of the things we actually are changing on the interior. So over here you see this big panel sort of sticking up in front of the driver. That's part of the new dashboard, the digital dash.
Like a Tesla, like an iPad sticking out.
A little bit, yeah. It's a little oversized. That's actually that's one of the minor changes that we are actually making as we go to the next generation of the shot, what we call shots. These are our first shots. So out of the molds, this is what we saw first. The other thing is there is a little bit of an indication that's going to be added to this area. And then on the 64s, we have a few minor changes. But so that is that was the Chevy. Here we have the Toyota. Toyota's got,
nice.
It looks like a street car from the front with all that sort of carved in arrow stuff. Again, you can see the air cleaners are different, or the air intakes are different.
Oh, really? From the Toyota to the Chevy, they're even there. I didn't realize that. Wow.
So each engine is OEM specific.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, these sort of intakes here would actually line up to the piercings if we had them in the hood.
That's really cool.
You can see, right? So it really does look like a Toyota street car. And the Chevy, the front end of the Chevy looks really, really good as well. It's a little harder to sort of interpret some of these without the graphics on it.
It's coming through the webcam pretty good, actually, but that's, the Ford.
Good. This is the Ford. Yep. There we go. And you can obviously see the motor there.
Yeah, I really didn't realize there were going to be like slight differences between at least the way the motors look from manufacturer to manufacturer. But I'm glad, that's cool that's coming through in diecast form as well.
Yeah, like I said, we actually get the real CAD data from the tech center, and we turn that into the car, so you can see the Mustang taillights there. Looks good. One thing we didn't really talk about is the wheels. They're going to be a little hard to see because they're black, but you can see, they look awesome. They look really, really good.
Those rims, yeah.
Well. But one of the really cool features I wanted to share with you, so the Ford I'm holding is actually the Elite. Mm-hmm. And so the difference is, with the Elite, we have the opening deck lid, and then the detail on the inside. I don't think maybe I get the angle there.
Yes, see the peak, yeah.
So the fuel tank has changed shape quite a bit. That's one of the big changes that you'll notice in the back. You can kind of see it a little bit. You only see the top. We've got the clear filler line there, or the fuel line. But one of the cool things that we learned was, so with the Elite cars, we do have the opening back, and we also have the die-cast chassis versus the plastic chassis on the ARC side. And when they showed us the car, they started to talk about the underwing and how the underwing kind of came off in different segments and panels, and that actually revealed the underworkings of the car. And we got back and we started talking about, well, how do we make the Elite different? How do we make that the true collectible, the most detailed piece? And so we decided to try to mimic what the underwing did for the real car in the diecast. And so while I have already had the 2 screws removed, the underwing will be detachable.
Oh, wow.
In this car. And so what that will reveal is all the under detail that goes into the car that you can see, so that you can see the suspension, obviously. You can see the bottom side of the fuel cell. We've got all the wires and pipes, the dual exhaust that will actually happen.
Oh, yeah.
So it's got it actually, you really can't see, there's two outlets, and there's a little piece that actually glues in here that makes it look like the tip of the pipe. That's on both sides. And the other thing with these is not only are the wheels posable on the Elite like they are on the ARC, but the suspension, let me see here, everything's backward on camera, but the suspension actually works.
Oh, wow.
So I'm moving the rear, obviously the rear. The front doesn't travel quite as much, but it does travel up in there a little bit. So you've got working suspension, posable wheels. But this is really cool to be able to see the level of detail that we've incorporated in this car. So if there was a need to repair the car, the team would put it up, obviously remove a panel. We didn't do it in multiple pieces. We couldn't in the DieCast, so we made it all one piece. That's not actually how it works. It does come off in separate pieces. But that's how we tried to emulate as close as we could the car. So for somebody who never really it'll be, so all of this, the chassis will be, or the underwing will be screwed down to the car. And then all of this is actually screwed to the platform like we've been shipping it in for protection. So when you first get your car, you'll remove the platform if you want to take it off. Then you have the ability to take this off or not, and just leave it. But that, like I said, is I think one of the coolest features of the new Elite car that's coming out. And again, we have the antennas and different things, but really trying to create as close of a representation of the car as we can in DieCast at 24 scale.
Yeah, that's super cool.
That's a really cool part. I will show you these real quick. They're the 64 scales I'm looking at here.
Oh yeah.
So you can kind of
see the
babies. They look great. One of the things that you'll actually notice as we look at these side to side, the glass in the cars is actually all the same. And that will be each OEM's sort of rear quarter window will be sort of shaped out through decoration process. So lots of different interesting things that we have to deal with this time around that we haven't in the past. But we're excited about it. We have our wireframe templates done and our wrap template done. And so we are anxiously awaiting some car art.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that kind of leads to my next question, because we know how intensive or it sounds like it's a very intense process designing a new car ready to ship basically from scratch. Like you said, been working on it since February of last year. But how long for a normal season, like say 2021, as normal as it can be, how long does it typically take from the time, a driver or a team debuts like a new big paint scheme or something like that? Like how long does it take from the reveal of the real car to the time the DieCast hits shelves or is ready to be shipped? How long does that usually take? What's that process in a normal year look like?
Yeah, I wish we had normal. It's been a long time since there's been normal. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And the pandemic has really had a massive impact on this stuff. And so let's talk about what it used to be.
You can compare the two, yeah.
I mean, we are back to we're back to 18 now, and leading into 19. So typically, depending on the time of year, okay, so we do get an influx of cars leading into Daytona, so that slows it down. We do only have so many artistic resources and bandwidth, and then ultimately the factory only has so much production capacity, and the decal manufacturer only has so many print presses. So, it's sort of like 100-year floods, right? So the pipeline can handle X amount of paint schemes at any given time, but when you push in twice that amount, it does back up and slow things down. But typically, we get a piece of artwork. We will process that artwork within the first 2 weeks of receiving it for a standard car. Now, race wins are a little bit of a different timeline, and we'll just sort of exclude them for this conversation. But a normal car, it's actually normally within a week, but we give ourselves 2 weeks to process that. That then gets kicked back out for an approval. Our artists are very, very good. The teams are responsive. So that typically takes less than a week, typically. And then the artwork comes back, either approved or approved with changes. We then upload that. About 5 to 6 weeks it would take to get a sample, meaning the factory would get it. They would do what they have to do. They send it off to the printer. The printer creates a decal sheet. comes back to the factory, they wrap that decal, and they then send us samples. From there, you got another week or two of approvals. Then we sign off that car. Concurrently, we're working on the packaging in the background. And the cars were being scheduled about 8 weeks, and then we would see shipping taking about 5 to 6 weeks. So all told, you were about 4 to 5 months in a normal situation. Race wins take longer. We have to wait for the data, meaning the pictures, etc. Second, it can lead, depending on the situation, it can lead to some further deeper discussions with sponsors. Sometimes they don't like confetti covering things up or different things like that. And it also takes our artists, depending on the amount of damage and detail, it can take them up to about a week to do a car. Whereas a standard paint car usually does not take more than 2 days for a really, really detailed car. So the timing to do a race win is at least twice, closer to 3 or 4 times longer than a standard paint scheme. Now let's fast forward to today.
Yeah.
So some of the things that are happening, I'm almost going to start backward on this, right? So it's been very, very well documented, the challenges with freight coming out of China. So we are seeing massive shortages of containers and cargo space on ships. Our container cost to bring a load of DieCast here has gone up nearly 5 times. It is just under 5 times what we were paying a year to a year and a half ago. It's significant. We are now seeing container costs for a 40-foot container, and that's what you see being hauled around on those tractor trailer flatbreads, of just the container cost that exceeds $20,000. So it's massive. From there, you have to hope that you have the ability to get on a cargo ship. So what will happen is the freight forwarders will create a booking. Typically, when you get a container, there is a booking behind that. That's if there's no outbreaks of COVID with the crew or with the port, where the Chinese government shuts down the port. We've had all of those things happen. Even in a normal year, a normal day, there are times when you head into peak capacity, getting product here for third and fourth quarter, they do overbook because there is a percentage of cans that just don't show up on time. We've been rolled off ships. I don't mean physically rolling off ships, but I mean
rolling the cars down like the walkway.
Yeah, no. What it means is your container shows up, but there's no space, and so they don't get it on. So you get rolled to the next booking. So that has created disruption. We are now seeing an average of about 50 days from China sale to here. Wow. That is now roughly 2 weeks longer on average than what we've been seeing in normal times once we actually get a booking. We have had weeks where containers have been at the factory and have had to wait a week or two to get on a ship. So that causes yet further delay, which is not in that 50-day average. And we've had weeks where we can't get containers, and that causes a week or two delay. And so we've had that problem. So our shipping window has gone from about 5 to 6 weeks to probably 8 to 10 in reality. So that's shipping. On the production side of things, so what I had said was about 8 weeks to produce the car. Labor within China has been disrupted by the pandemic. And so when the pandemic broke out, when it first broke out in China, they were heading into Chinese New Year. A lot of people went home. So what happens in China, if people don't understand migrant labor, people come from the rural lands into the cities. They take jobs. They work throughout the course of the year, typically sending money back home. And then they travel once a year to their hometowns to celebrate Chinese New Year, which is a 3 to 4 week celebration. The whole country, or at least the whole coastal part of the country, jumps on trains, jumps in cars, and migrates back to their homelands. And so when people left for ahead of the outbreak, or as things were starting to get tough, China is extremely restrictive. They have a lot lower case count and outbreaks because they are extraordinarily restrictive in what happens if a COVID outbreak happens. And so what we've had happen is a lot of people have given up the migrant work, just like every developing country. And with today's technology, things change. People are changing their patterns of working and migrating. So we've seen that. We've seen people, because of the surge in demand here, factories are paying higher wages. So people move around to where the higher wages are. So our factory happens to be not in what I would call a heavily populated area with a major city. We're in sort of a minor city, several hours outside in a more rural area. So the draw of people is more localized. So even as labor rates go up, they are still more competitive elsewhere. And so people go where the money is, right? And so China is no different than here. So we've had trouble getting people coming back from Chinese New Year in the first place. We've had trouble getting, or the factory has had trouble getting additional resources as demand has increased. And so we've seen a massive shift in the amount of time for cars to come out of the factory. So where we were 8 to 10 weeks, we have seen probably an average of about 18 weeks for production. We've seen it probably as low as about 16 and probably as high as about 24, which is a massive shift, a massive shift. And we kind of ebb and flow. They do bring in interns and summer work. So we did get a little bit of improvement over the summer months. They have lost most of that workforce at this point. And so we have actually seen a shift backward the other way. We are hand to mouth. There was a period of time where, and we always have a little bit of inventory on hand, and we obviously ship mass goods into the large big boxes in Walmart and Target, Meijer. We actually had more inventory on the water than we had in our warehouse, which is an extraordinary statement on the racing side of things. So to be in that position just shows how much demand there is and how little supply there is, which has been real challenging.
Yeah, that's been a challenge for a lot of industries as well. But it's interesting to hear how it's affected DieCast specifically. That's the stuff behind the scenes stuff that fans, I guess, don't hear about or see ever really.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really articulated in a way that somebody who is not in product understands. But we're it's not uncommon for us to be. We've got Lowe's Corporation is located very local here. It's not uncommon to have people in their buying offices and you be at a kid's sporting game and you start talking about some of the things like this. And major companies, major companies, and we're talking Walmarts and Targets and Lowe's and Home Depot and Amazon, and they're just renting whole ships. And that is creating a disruption in the shipping market because all of the small guys like us lose the ability to have any chance of getting a space on that ship, right? And so they're doing what's right for their business, which makes sense. It's just when you don't have that ability, you are at the mercy of what's there and available. So we've got all of that situation. And then, of course, there's our situation here locally. Now, the good news is we've returned most of the office to in-person working. Honestly, our IT team did a yeoman's job. In a week time. They had literally this entire operation set up working from home remotely with our phone systems, with our computer systems. Our artists really have not missed a beat. So that timeline has been pretty well maintained. The approval timelines, for the most part, have been pretty well maintained. We've changed our practices a little bit. We do rely a little more on technology and imaging as opposed to physical samples, just because when people aren't in offices and stuff, it is harder to get things to them. But outside of that, we really haven't seen a whole lot of change there. So most of the shift for the foreseeable future, to be honest, is really in the timeline from sampling, and I didn't touch on this. So the same labor supply issues that affect the production side of things also affect the decal manufacturer. So the decal manufacturer is not at the factory that makes the actual car. They outsource that. And that printing process, they've had the same labor issues. And so, you've got capacity there. So our sampling times have gone up as well. We tend to be closer to 6 to 7 weeks as opposed to, 3, 4, 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, little increments here, and here, but it all sort of adds up into a much longer term situation.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, when the cars have made it to shelves, they look as good as ever. I'll say that. And I want to ask this kind of the last question because this is one that I think a lot of fans are always sort of curious to hear a little behind the scenes. And maybe it's not a super exciting answer. I have no idea. But we just saw the latest wave of NASCAR Authentics revealed. I love that liquid color Christopher Bell Craftsman car. I'm going to be hunting for that one. But how does Lionel decide what cars make it into each NASCAR Authentics wave?
So there's several things that have to come into factor here. One is what can we put in there, right? And so realize it is sold in a toy aisle. So all alcohol marks, as with all 64s, are stripped off, but any alcohol cars are obviously excluded, and that does affect some drivers pretty dramatically. So obviously that comes off. There's also things like energy drinks and stuff like that you can't put in there. So there are some sponsors who just simply don't fit well into the mass space. There are other things that we'd love to do that we sometimes can't because we don't have rights to do, right? And so mass distribution is what we call a channel. So there's the collector channel, there's the RCCA channel, which is online. The mass channel has sometimes separate licensing requirements or restrictions. And so we can't put those cars in there either. Kevin Harvick is a great example this year. We wanted to do it, but we weren't able to. We were able to work very closely with the team and had an awesome dialogue there to get as many of the 24 scales made for collectors. But that was a car that we really had hoped to put in mass. So you've got all of that going on. And then from there, it's a little bit of a mix. We are responsible for managing, as is every vendor who's in a mass retail space. We're responsible for managing the turn of what they call the peg or the location. And so we have to ensure that there's enough demand for the cars that people really want, so the really popular cars. But at the same time, what we have found is there's a real trend for cars that aren't made. So sometimes there are 64 scales and collector that don't make MOQ, but then go into the mass space and become some of our most popular cars because it's the only place you can get them. And so they kind of become de facto exclusives. They're not really designed to be an exclusive, but that is how they work. And we can track, based on sales data that comes back to us, we can track and see velocity of how things move off the shelf. And so in conjunction with our sales analyst from the mass side, we review that, and then we select the cars that are there to be produced and set up a wave and get those segmented out. So there is a real sort of science behind it. It's not just, we'll grab this one, that one, and that one. We do try to include a truck when we can. We do try to pick probably one of the more popular ones for a liquid color. So there's, it's a little bit of gut feel, and it's a little bit of science that kind of goes into it, and that's kind of how we do it.
Interesting. Yeah, because I always feel like the lineups are very like eclectic. Like there's always you expect to see a Chase Elliott or a William Byron, the popular drivers. And then you'll see like a kind of an off the beaten path Ryan Blaney scheme thrown in there, and I'm like, whoa, did not expect that. But it's always you can see some of them, or where behind me you can see some authentics on the wall right here. Like I'm like a kid in the candy store. I go to the toy aisle anytime I'm in Walmart, Target, so I'm always on the lookout. But that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, no, it's the mass collector is a little bit of a different collector. There is certainly a completionist element to the mass collector, and that's where that checklist on the back of the packaging comes into play, where we show the entire assortment of the wave, and there is the mentality of get them all, which doesn't really come into play as much on the 24 scale, just largely because of price. There are those ultimate collectors.
Like that Chase Elliott guy I mentioned. That blew my mind. There's like 60 cars.
Yeah. we've known a lot of them who really do, and they seek out every iteration, every version of these things, which is awesome. And those are the kind of people that you want to have, and they become your sort of ultimate collectors, which was sort of the inspiration for something we do on the elite side in the club with the ultimate collector option. But so it's been it's a cool process. It's really cool to see unfold. It's cool to see sort of the behind the scenes of it. But like I said, the podcast is really designed to be able to sort of share some of this stuff on a deeper level of how we do what we do, why we do what we do, and give the collectors a little bit more insight.
Absolutely. Well, you've given us all a good crash course here in what the process looks like, how it's evolved, the challenges being faced today. But like I said, when they do hit the shelves, when I do get my package in the mail and I unbox it, they look as great as ever. So really appreciate your time, Howard, and showing us that behind the scenes look at the new next gen car samples and prototypes there. That's really exciting. And one final time, everyone watching, everyone listening, you can listen to Authenticated on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of the major podcast platforms right now. Howard, thank you so much for being on the show. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thank you again to Howard, and thank you to Lionel for showing off those next-gen die-casts. Those are going to look good with full-on paint schemes next year. Links to episodes of Authenticated, the all-new Lionel Racing podcast, are down in the description below. That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your tremendous support every single month. I greatly appreciate it. Got some more videos planned for later this week, some more guests coming on the show very soon, so I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, y'all.